I don't have any questions. I have an answer. I was an educator in DC public schools for 10 years. I was an administrator for 1 year. And I'll tell you this, one of the problems we have in our communities is we don't have a real leadership structure, not just in black communities, in everybody's community. I am a product of the civil rights movement. My parents, they raised me on the grounds of read or die. Educate yourself, read or die. There was no do or don'ts. But I'll tell you something, I see accountability way up here and responsibility way down here. I'm gonna call it like it is. That's the problem. I'm not gonna blame that on hip hop because, and I can't say there's really an achievement gap either. The problem is we have a community of people who have lost responsibility for younger folks. That's what's going on. You know, we got a whole, I'm sick of people playing the blame game. The middle schools blame the elementary schools. The high schools blame the middle schools. The colleges, when those kids get in remedial classes and they can't get past their sophomore years, they blame the high schools. It's everybody, it's a community's responsibility to be responsible, culpable. And it's everybody's responsibility to say, even though that's not my child, there was always somebody there to say, even if I stepped on somebody's grass, I'm gonna call your mother and tell her that you stepped on so-and-so's grass. I was afraid to be, you know, just not responsible. I mean, we have to get back to a culture and a community of responsibility. It's not really a revolution that we need. It's really people helping other people. It's camaraderie in the truest form.
Good afternoon now.
Good afternoon.
My name is Davia Walker. I'm actually an educator currently in DC public schools, have been for 13 years. And I actually have seen children from my youth who are now adults, Dwight Franklin over here, and one of my former educators, Ms. Constance Raza. So right here in this room, we already have a very close connection of people who have actually been a part of the civil rights movement, grown up in the civil rights movement, have been called part of the hip hop movement, Generation X, the lost generation, all these type of things. But the thing that I say that we all should take away from, you know, this general discussion is that education is powerful. And if we don't educate ourselves, continue to educate our children and make sure that they understand how important education is, we all will lose out. We all will lose out. And I think I originally came in here thinking that the chasm was really wide between civil rights and hip hop. It really isn't. We brought up the same things over and over again, that we really do want the same things. We may be going about them in different ways, but the bottom line is we do want better. Thank you.
I have a question specifically for Kwame and Cheryl. I think that one of the biggest things is there are so many voices unheard, and I'm curious, particularly we have Bomani, and we have a host of DC artists that shouldn't be knocking on different doors. They should have their doors knocked on, and I'm curious, particularly Kwame, how do we get that? How do we make that happen? Where do we get those gatekeepers to allow Bomani to be coming into these schools? Or there's the Prison Poetry, a play. How do we open those doors and allow those choices to come into our schools to allow them to see different pictures? And how do we not just discuss it and talk about it as a good idea, but to execute it and create a mandate to get these choices available to those students?
Well, let me say, that first of all, it started by something called education reform. If you'd have asked me last year, you know, I would have had to call the superintendent, and hopefully they would have called me back, and then he would have gave me to an assistant superintendent who may have called me back, and then, you know, we would have been going around the Robin Hood barn on why we think this is a great idea, and they would have told me what they've been doing for the last 20 years and how that's great, which I have a tremendous amount of respect for DCPS. I'm a graduate of DCPS. But now I think we have a more direct approach in which we will, you know, whether you agree or disagree, as a legislator, it's easy for me to get access to have the conversation, to push to see how we can get more of this into our schools. As before, it just wasn't there. So when you say how can that happen, I think we can start that movement of that happening now. Like, for instance, I never knew he wanted to get into a DC public school. So today, I've been, you know, I'm educated. Now that I know, and I know he'll bug me. Don't y'all agree that he will call and talk to me about it? But now that I understand that, now we can work on how we get there. So I'm all open to do that.
Cheryl?
I think first we have to get out of the headset that there are good guys and bad guys, you know, and that the good guys were the civil rights and the bad guys are hip-hop, or vice versa. The good guys are hip-hop and the bad guys are civil rights. I think we have to figure out, now that we're here, and maybe my generation didn't do the job it had set out to do. Now that we're here now, what is it that we can do? And I think you had terrific suggestions about, I've been talking about getting entrepreneurship into middle schools. I mean, there are lots of programs already developed that we could just put into middle schools, but we don't do it. I think that's a great idea. I do think it's a fantastic idea to teach revolution. You know, there's a guy named Moses who did a math program. I don't know how many of you are, but he came from the old civil rights movement of getting people agitated about not having their civil rights, and what he did is he applied those principles and he got young people agitated about not taking algebra. And he really changed schools in terms of who they left out of algebra. So I think we need to teach revolution because kids are angry and they're frustrated and they have to know how to do that, how to change their lives, how to make change that's constructive for them. And I think we have to bring in hip-hop people and to talk about hip-hop and to talk about what the potential of hip-hop is, both positive and negative. And I'm definitely getting your card when I leave. So I think this is a good, very first step, because we're polarizing and stereotyping each other. And, you know, while I will take responsibility for the failures of my generation, what I really want to know is, what can we do now? What is it that we need to do now that we don't have, you know, kids going into schools that are just deadening their minds and their souls?
Yes, my name is Casey Wilson, more affectionately known as Kepler the Evolutionary. One question I had is that we talk about the media and what they're doing and the corporations and what they're pushing to our children, but one question I always ask, is there a counter, you know, attack? Is there a counter strategy? Because if they're spending millions of dollars and taking psychologists out of the colleges and putting them in marketing firms, where's our counter marketing firms for education? Where's our counter marketing firms for conscious hip hop? Because I hear a lot of, you know, the organizations and the corporations and Time Warner, but we don't have even a counter strategy to go after that. So my question is there one available? Is it in development? Because I'm considering developing one, but if there's something already available, let me know.
There are people all over the place trying to make positive hip-hop music, both videos, music, movies, art. I know personally, like, I just started a record label. It's called Insaroma Records, and I have a staff of about 9,000 people. That's everybody on my email list. I told them all that, you know, it's me and them, so they need to pass it around. I think the internet has definitely leveled the playing field. So we gotta make sure that we use the internet, that we use these hip hop websites that aren't completely controlled by some of the bigger corporations, and we gotta start making it personal. And like I said, there are people with money and power who are spending money and power. I have issues with, like, the Enough is Enough campaign. The ones who protest in front of Deborah Lee's house. I wrote something on my blog. I was saying the same energy they used to use a 1965 technique and you know, protesting around in the corner, they could have gotten all of these people at a computer, emailing all these kids on MySpace and sending them to hip-hop artists that better represent our aspirations and our lifestyles. We can't destroy all the time. We have to start promoting. And I think we have to do it on a personal level. I'm not sure where the money's gonna come from until some of the bigger corporations see some money in it. But at a personal level, the internet has leveled the playing field and we have to use it as much as possible.
I'd like to say just one last thing. Is there any possible way we could leave the audience with our email addresses or something? Because we need to get some kind of feedback. Like you said, it'd be cool to have something like this.
We can actually, if you would like, we can put your information on our website.
Right. Could you please do that? Because without being connected to the people, I mean, what is all of this for?
I want to thank you on behalf of the Humanities Council for attending this wonderful event. Before we completely close out, Mr. Murray, do you have any final thoughts or comments?